Welcome back to the Shabbos Treasures series. I'm Gila Ross, host of the Power Up podcast, and I'm here together with my co-host,
Rabbi Samuel Ross, and we are delighted to be able to share a weekly idea that you can take into your Shabbos and upgrade and beautify immediately. Enjoy. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is. Okay, great having everyone with us. And this is really where we start to up it a little bit. The first two sessions was more of an introduction. Yes, we looked at one or two examples. Like the first session, we looked at what Shabbos is, why it's important, the 39 types of work. Last week, we moved on a bit of a tangent and we looked at why there are so many rabbinic laws of Shabbos, what Shabbos would look like if there were no rabbinic laws. It would look much simpler. It would look, it actually wouldn't feel very much necessarily like what we think Shabbos is. And so from this week, we're really going to start taking a topic a week. This is before we get into the 39 categories, we're going to look at the rabbinic ones. Actually, we've got somebody else joining us. We're going to look at the rabbinic ones. And we're going to start looking at them as case studies. And again, the aim of this course is, the aim is to try and take a thing a week that whatever you are on your own observance ladder, on your own level of observance is, that you can take it and hopefully you'll be able to incorporate it. Hopefully without too much work. You'll take one idea a week and you'll add this treasure into your own Shabbos. Welcome, Nikki. It's great having you with us.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Okay, it's really, really good having you with us. So again, that's really the idea from tonight. We're starting to look at Muktza, which is a real, I got to say, within Judaism, I don't know many topics that are as misunderstood as Muktza is. It's like, I remember all the years back, when we used to do teen Shabbatons.
Does everyone know what Muktza is?
No, I hope not anyway, because otherwise my thunder is about to be stolen. And we used to start the Shabbatons, and we used to say, if you want to hand in your phone just for one Shabbos, you're welcome to keep one real Shabbos. Your friends are here anyway. You have to text them under the table. And they used to, say, I'm not going to do any Muktza with my phone the Shabbos. And the truth is, Muktza is it's an issue, like it's a Shabbos prohibition. But I wouldn't say that was necessarily the biggest problem with the phone. Like there are so many other issues that come up as well, technology and electricity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I really feel that Muktza is something that is totally, totally misunderstood. So let's begin. What is Muktza? Please, somebody define it. Let's not give an example, let's define it.
Steal your thunder.
Something which you can't touch on Shabbat.
Okay, so the first answer is going to be something that you can't touch. Believe it or not, there are probably two reasons that that's incorrect. On one hand, you're being way too strict. And on the other hand, it's maybe a semi-example, which is not entirely correct. It's a little bit too strict, but I definitely wouldn't use it as a definition. And again, I'm telling you, anyone would just say, it's just, you're just breaking Shabbos. Or let's try and define Muktza for a minute. Okay, so let me at least define it, and then we're going to get into some examples. Actually, before we get into some examples, I wrote up some case studies, and maybe Gila will fly through them, and you'll try and attempt some answers to them. But let me define what Muktza means. It's very simple. It means set apart from use. It's something which is set apart from regular use. Again, it's because it's something which is not Shabbos friendly. It's something which has nothing to do with Shabbos. So it's set apart. And in order that we use it on Shabbos, it has to be prepared for Shabbos use. Okay, so in terms of a definition, that's it. It's something which is set apart. Once we start going through the examples, I think you'll get more of an idea as to how that makes sense. Now, why did I say the ritual was being too strict? There is actually no prohibition to touch Muktza. The problem is to move it. So it works like this. We could give an example, let's give an example of a log. So there wouldn't, let's just say for argument's sake that a log that you see in a park is Muktza. Let's say for argument's sake. Let's say it's nothing to do with Shabbos, it's set aside, which is what the definition of Muktza is, nothing to do with Shabbos. Let's say for argument's sake. So now, for me to touch it wouldn't be a problem. But let's say I would have, I don't know, give an example of something very flimsy that's Muktza. I don't know, let's say a birth certificate. Let's say a birth certificate is Muktza, which we'll see in a couple of minutes, as to why that possibly is even Muktza. By me touching it, it will almost certainly move because it's so light. But the point is, it's not necessarily a problem to touch the thing. It's a problem to move the thing. So again, so Muktza is a problem, and Richard, I really thank you for bringing that up. Actually, I didn't even get to that in the Wednesday session. Muktza, really the problem is the moving of something, but the definition of Muktza is something which is set aside from Shabbos use. It's nothing to do with Shabbos. Okay, so that's what Muktza is. Now that we know what Muktza is, Gillet's going to run through, and again, feel free to answer as we're going along. Some of these you're going to think, what? That is Muktza? That isn't Muktza? Again, feel free to ask. And then we'll give you over the principles and we'll try and relate it back to the cases. So please, Gilla, go for it.
So playing in a sandpit, is that Muktza or not Muktza on Shabbos? Am I asking everyone?
Yeah, sure. Again, people can, if not, we'll fly through the cases. People are welcome to comment.
I think it's acceptable for Shabbos.
I'm sorry?
I think it's acceptable to play in the sandpit for Shabbos.
Okay, again, by the time we're done, we're going to see the theory as to the why and the how. Because
and then we'll come back to the answer.
Yeah, because the aim is to try and make your life easy. My aim, again, the whole point of this course is to give you a thing a week that you can do. And you're going to find, even with things that are Muktza, there might be ways when you need to be able to move things where it's not necessarily a problem, even when they seem to be Muktza. So again, we'll see how that relates, because again, your own level of Shabbos observance. So we'll see how that relates to sand. But the point, but let's say Darren is correct. We'll see by the end whether he's correct about a sandpit. But what about sand? Meaning, what about if it was on a beach? What about if you had, I don't know, some sort of sand collection? Would that be Muktza? So we're going to look at sand in particular, and we're going to look at the sandpit. Even though your answer may actually be right, Darren, we're going to see that sand is actually, per se, sand could actually be an issue. Okay.
All right, what about I'm going to bed and I find that I left my phone on my pillow. Not that this has ever happened, but let's just say it would have happened.
Or your kid has left it there,
Blame the kids and everything, right? All right, so third scenario. Can I crack open a nut with a hammer? I don't know if anyone remembers those days when we used to get like the walnuts and crack them open. Yes, we remember them. So is that something that I can do with a hammer? Okay, a hammer that's usually used for building and stuff like that.
You're also welcome to nod or to shake. Okay, so Andrew's doing it.
Andrew's
we like it. No,
Andrew's
he
not
doesn't like
happy
it.
with you. Oops.
On the basis that the hammer is for everyday use, and the fact that you talked about sort of having a Shabbos comb and an everyday comb, the same argument would be if that hammer's being used on every other day, then effectively it must be Muktza by definition.
So Andrew, hang on about 5 minutes. You're thinking in the right way. Again, we'll have to see that a hammer, for technical reasons, in this case, may be okay, but you're thinking in the right way. You're thinking about Shabbos use. So I like the way you're thinking, and you're in very good company, because Guy gave the same facial expression as you did, shake of the head just yesterday. Okay.
I'm wondering whether it's allowed because if you're going to eat the nut on Shabbos, and because the tool isn't designed for that, I wonder if that makes the difference.
Ooh.
Okay, good.
Ooh, we'll come to that. But
we're going to come back to that.
Very impressive answer. Very, very impressive answer. Throw out a dirty nappy. Can I do that on Shabbos?
Or are we stuck with the smell, assuming someone has still got smell in this crazy time in history?
Yes. So
I haven't smelt a dirty nappy in about 2 weeks. So.
It's the one pro of COVID. I'm in the sukkah, and the sukkah decorations have fallen. Can I move them on Shabbos? I mean, this is something that comes up, I think, almost every year over Sukkot. You're there and like the decorations fall down. Are they Muktza? Can we move them on Shabbos?
Or even on Yom Tov.
You can probably move them, but not put them back. That's what I would expect the answer to be.
Okay, we're going to have to see. We're
keeping you in suspense until the end here. Fresh egg that your chicken lays. I don't know if anyone here has chickens. We do not.
And if none of you happen to live in Hawaii and don't have chickens, let's come up with a much more common scenario, which would be the same sort of situation where the cow in your backyard gives off milk on Shabbos. Okay, maybe as equally as unlikely, but that's the theory.
I think chickens may be more likely than a cow. Cows are a little bit bigger.
Okay, I hear that.
Okay, now this one is so the Shabbat table where I've got my tablecloth and I've got my candles on it, my candles sticks. So can I use the Shabbat table on Shabbos day if the candlesticks were on it on Friday night?
And I know everyone's thinking like, what could possibly be the problem? Like, it's beautiful to put the Shabbos candlesticks on the Shabbos table.
I'm going to make the question even harder, because I mean, invariably someone will spill something on the tablecloth. Can I take the tablecloth off and change the tablecloth?
And I'm going to make it even harder. Even once the candles have burnt out, we're now Shabbos lunch, Shabbos morning. We want to set up, but I've got my candlesticks sort of still sitting there from the night before, which were Muktza. Is there a possible problem over here? Okay, so that's definitely one study we're going to look at tonight. So again, we've got our 7 cases. We've got the sandpit, the phone left on the bed, not with a hammer, throwing out the dirty nappy, sukkah decorations that have fallen down, the fresh egg or chicken is laid, and can you use the Shabbos table for Shabbos day once candlesticks were left on it Friday night? So those are the scenarios that we're going to look at. In order that we can answer these questions, I want to give you some theory, and then we're going to come back to the questions. This is the theory. Why was Muktza ever set up? So this is the story. Again, we're going to assume for our purposes that it's a rabbinic law, even though there are some sources that seem to suggest that it's more than just rabbinic, that there could be some biblical implication. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that it's rabbinic. And we saw last week that the reason that rabbinic laws are set up is anybody recall why rabbinic laws were set up?
In order to put a fence around the Torah.
Perfect. It's either to have that fence. We saw that from that Mishnah, to have the fence, and also it adds to the specialness of the day. Otherwise you could end up not having a special day. But with Muktza, there was another reason, and it's a really interesting one. At the beginning of the Second Temple era, the prophet Nehemiah noticed some laxity in Shabbos observance. I do not know what that means. I do not know how many. I don't think we're suggesting that the whole Jewish nation, God forbid, we're not keeping Shabbos, but whatever it means, there was some laxity in the observance of Shabbos at the beginning of the Second Temple period. So in order to deal with it, he had the authority, as the rabbis do, to add Muktza, and he made it really, really strict. What we have in Muktza today, it was actually stricter. There were more categories. And then once, it's interesting, that's Shabbos was stricter than ours. And then once they took it more seriously, then they took off some categories and we're sort of left with what we have today. That was the history of how Muktza began. But there are some objects that are by default never included in Muktza. For example, food items, tableware, Torah books, etc., etc. None of those are ever included in Muktza. And again, we saw Muktza is only a problem to move. It's not a problem to touch unless it will move through being touched. So this is what I'm now going to do. I could just give you some examples of Muktza, because what I want to do now is I want to give you some examples of what Muktza is, just to be aware of it. You might find different scenarios. And then I'm going to tell you when Muktza doesn't apply, meaning there are 3 different scenarios when the rabbis just said, they were the ones who set it up. They said Muktza doesn't exist. They set it up unless there were 3 scenarios. So the first thing I'm going to go through is, believe it or not, there are 7 different categories of Muktza. Now, the categories are not important, but I'll fly through them in order that you get a feel of what's going on. You'll get the theory. So these are the categories, and each one I'll give you 2 or 3 examples. You just get a feel of what it is. The first example, I'm going to call it intrinsically Muktza. So we're going to go back to our sand, Darren. Remember our sand? There couldn't be any problem with sand.
Yeah.
If anything, it might be the most severe form of Muktza. Something which intrinsically is Muktza. A rock, broken glass, sand, things like that. Okay? I'm not yet getting back to our case of the sandpit and why the sandpit is okay. Sandpit is okay for various reasons. But right now, I'm just giving you what, in theory, the categories of problem are. So you've got your intrinsic muktzah, you've got your pebbles and your rocks and your sand. Things that are just nothing to do with Shabbos. Again, if they were to do a Shabbos like a sandbox, then we have to work out how to deal with that. So I will go through that in about 5 minutes. The second category of muktzah is when something is either it's very valuable or it's fragile. So valuable might mean, I don't know, it could mean a phone or a camera or whatever. But if it's fragile, and it's something that you don't leave lying around, whether that's a birth certificate or a passport or whatever. So things that you just wouldn't leave lying around because, they're valuable. So that's also going to be muktzah. The next category is actually the lightest form of muktzah. We'll explain in a minute what I mean by that. But something which is like the hammer, which, usually you're probably going to use for a nothing to do with Shabbos act. Let's look at our hammer. You don't use it for a nut, but you could. So things like a hammer, things like I guess a fan, an empty pot. Pot is usually used, but you could use a pot to warm up food. You're allowed to. But the point is that you've got this one category, which is we're going to call it muktzah due to prohibition, because usually it's used like a pot is often used for cooking, a hammer often used for banging in nails. But you could use it for other things. That's going to be much lighter. Okay, I'm going to carry on. Fourth one is muktzah due to it being repulsive. The dead rodent. The dirty nappy. Fifth one, muktzah due to a mitzvah. For example, a shofar on Shabbos. Or sukkah decorations. Sixth one, something that's born on Shabbos. Cow milk, sap from a tree, ash. And the seventh one, again, I'm more interested in giving you examples. The seventh one is when something becomes a base. So let's look at our example of the Shabbos table. So the Shabbos table is now going to become the base for the Muktza candlesticks. Because candlesticks are Muktza. So now by putting them on the table, my table has become a base to the candlesticks. So forget about the candlesticks that are Muktza. I can't use the table anymore. In 5 minutes' time, I'll tell you how you could get around the problem. But in theory, I'll give you another example. Let's say you have a bowl of nuts, bowl of chocolate, but you've left your car keys lying around in it. The bowl, in theory, now is a base. That bowl is a base for something that's muktzah. So that's the seventh category. I'm going to fly through what the categories are. The first, again, you've got intrinsic muktzah, things which have got nothing to do with Shabbos, sand, broken glass, pebbles, muktzah, whether it's high in value or it's fragile. You've got your passports, you've got your camera, things which are often muktzah, things like the empty pots, the hammer, muktzah because it's repulsive, the dirty rodent, everybody thinks of the dirty rat, yeah? We hope not to discover that, but I don't know, in my place in Vancouver, I used to see unfortunately, more than once mice running around, although they weren't dead, unfortunately. I wish they would have been. That's a different story. A dirty diaper, dirty nappy, muktzah due to a mitzvah, your shofar on Shabbos, leftover oil from Hanukkah menorah, sukkah decorations, something that was born on Shabbos like cow milk, and finally the base. You've got the table for the tray. You've got the table or the tray for the Shabbos candles, or money left in a bowl. Okay. I'm now going to give you over 3 different ways that muktzah is not a problem. Now, it's not a question of it being a rabbinic loophole. Like, in case somebody wants to say to me, well, the rabbis allow everything. Because by the time I'm now going to give you the 3 exceptions, the 3 principles, it sounds like, yeah, but that's muktzah, but I'm always allowed to move it. I want to explain. They set muktzah up because people weren't taking it seriously. But they only set it up in certain circumstances. It was understood that it was set up on the understanding that when people realize that really you shouldn't be doing it, but you do it in a way that is in itself making the mark that I know that it is Shabbos, therefore I'm not touching it in the usual way or whatever the form is. The rabbis never set up the prohibition of muktzah because it's rabbinic. Again, this wouldn't apply in a biblical law. It can only apply in a rabbinic law. So there are 3 circumstances, and we'll apply it to all of our cases, where in theory, muktzah doesn't exist. Number 1 is when you indirectly move the item. So let's say a coin falls into a plate of food. You could move the plate even though the coin will move with it. Again, this is not an ideal situation, and I will always try and shake out the coin first. But let's say I can't because I've got food there and the food will get ruined. I'm not moving the bowl, the plate for the sake of the coin. I'm moving it for the sake of the food that's in it. So when it's indirectly being moved with it, and I don't have any option, I'm allowed to move it. It's not like, okay, now a coin fell in this plate and I've got all my cookies in it and I can't move the cookies anymore. I'm still allowed to move the cookies. So that's number one. Exception number one is the rabbis did not set up their own prohibition of Muktza when it's indirect, when you're indirectly moving the item. Okay, you got that? When you're indirectly moving it, you're not moving it with your hand, it's part of something else that comes with it, it's okay. The second way I just told you, which is shaking it. If you shake that Muktza item off, they allowed it. Again, the same example. Your coin falls into a cookie plate. You are allowed to shake it out. Again, you're not directly using your hand, you're shaking it out. So the first two examples are very similar. The best case scenario is you're allowed to shake a Muktza item off if it's there. I didn't put it, I don't want it there. I'm allowed to shake it out. And the second item is if I have to, I'm allowed to indirectly move it with the non-Muktza item. Okay. The third example, the example that Jeremy brought up yesterday of the teeth. You are allowed, when Muktza is in the way, you can move it in an awkward or an abnormal way. So if your kid accidentally leaves something lying around that's going to get ruined, you could kick it out the way. Your phone is left on the bed. I guess in theory, you could use your teeth and get rid of it. So use the back of your elbow. They never set it up. They only set up the prohibition of Muktza. They only set it up when you're using your usual hand to move it. They did not set it up when you're doing it in an abnormal way. So again, let me give you the 3 times again, all at the different places out of our Shabbos observance. So, you might have a situation where your phone is left in your bed. And I don't know what you do and you don't do with your own Shabbos. That's not what we're discussing right now. But instead of touching it with your hand and moving it, you could shake it off, or you could use the back of your elbow to knock it off the bed or whatever it is. You haven't violated Shabbos. The 3 ways are you are allowed to indirectly move an item, you're allowed to shake it off, or you're allowed to move it in an awkward or an abnormal way. Those are the 3 built-in exceptions when the rabbis themselves never set up Muktza. There is one other exception, which is, and this is only like the category of the hammer. Because again, the hammer, I could use for a nut. Like if I want, I could use it for a nut. So when, in that category, when either you need it for its space or there's a need for it. Let's say I need the space. Let's just use the example of a fan. It's pointing in the wrong direction. I can't unplug it, but I can move it to point in a different direction. Or let's say I've got my hammer. I am allowed to use the hammer for the nut. So only in the category, I don't want to get too confusing, and it's a really hot topic, but only in the category when the item in theory could get used for something that is non-Muktza. Sorry, that is a category where in theory the thing could also be used for a Shabbos-friendly activity like breaking a nut, something like a hammer, something like scissors. Scissors, I could cut, wrapping off something, I could get into it, into a game or into food. So then I'm allowed to use it if either I need the space, if I need the area, or if I need it for a need for itself. But other than that, I've got the inbuilt 3 things. I can push it out of the way. I can indirectly move it. I can shake it off, or I can move it in an awkward way, like the teeth, the foot, or an elbow. Let's look at our 7 cases, and then we will wrap up. Now that we've seen that sand is actually one of the strictest forms of Muktza, because it's intrinsically a problem. So now that I've got my exceptions, how can I ever be allowed to, I'll give you 2 scenarios, walk on a beach or play in a sandpit. They're both okay, by the way. But why are either okay? Sand is the most severe form of Muktza. So
Go on,
Richard and then Andrew.
Is the sandpit because the sand is enclosed, so it can't kind of change shape past the edges of the sandpit?
So it's interesting. It's sort of because of that reason. When something is like intrinsically Muktza, if I designate, like sand is useless for Shabbos, but if I want to use it for Shabbos, I've got a toy I want to use with it. If I designate it for Shabbos, because the whole point of Muktza is it's set aside for Shabbos use. So now I'm allowed to set it for Shabbos use. So if by putting it in the box, I'm automatically giving it a designation for Shabbos. Yes, it's because of the box, but the box makes it designated for Shabbos use. It's not a problem. Because yes, usually most sand in the world is nothing to do with Shabbos. Neither is a pebble or a rock. But if I want to play with pebbles, it's not, as long as I designate them for as a game, it's not a problem. Because the whole point of Muktza, once you know the definition, it's something which is set aside for use. So Richard's right, because it's in the box, and you're making the point that it wouldn't have to be in a box. If it would be somewhere else, but I designate it, whatever the game is or the use is, it's fine. When you're talking about walking on sand, Andrew, I think you were going to comment on that one, why that's okay.
No, I was actually going to comment exactly the same as what Richard was going to say about the sandbox, the fact that it was enclosed and you weren't moving it.
So again, you've designated it for Shabbos. In effect, you've designated it. It's no longer set aside. It's now set for Shabbos. So in terms of walking on sand, you're going to have a different reason that it's okay. Darren, the reason that when you're in the Bahamas that you can walk on sand on Shabbos is because you're doing it in an abnormal way. You're using your feet, you're not using your hands. It's only, Muktza's only problem to use it in a normal way. When you do it in an abnormal way, it's not a problem. So again,
Samuel?
Yeah, Nikki, please.
So say you're on the beach on Shabbos and you're having a walk, and obviously you're using your feet, which is not a normal way. But what happens if you're walking with the kids and they start to, I don't know, build a sandcastle? Is that then
It's a great question. It's a great question. And we will, please God, 1 week do a question in terms of how to deal with kids specifically when it comes to Shabbos. And it'll be probably very similar to kids in any law. And any Jewish law, eating meat and milk and kosher, it's gonna, you're gonna have a lot of these questions. So you've got to use a judgment. It's going to be a question of the age of the kid. There might be a difference between a 1-year-old. Again, 1-year-old may have a problem with an Erev anyway, but there might be a difference between a 2 or a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old. I think there's going to be a difference, between those. But predominantly, sand, in theory, in practice, is Muktza. But it happens to be that it's not a problem to touch Muktza indirectly. So when you walk on sand, it just isn't the problem. So I think the general rule is it's going to depend on the age of the kid. A kid who has no comprehension of a law, I don't think you need to stop them doing it. But again, what we're training them for, okay, but it's a good question. Okay, so that's that.
But if you walked on sand, and you got sand on your feet, are you allowed to brush it off?
Okay, so again, that might be a part of one of the other principles that we'll see in a minute. Is if something is there that you don't want, like the nappy, you can get rid of it. So okay, so that could be okay. So playing in the sandpit, it's not a problem because Muktza is something which isn't designated, which is set aside for Shabbos. Now I'm bringing it in for Shabbos, so I could do that with a rock. I could do that with anything. But okay, so there is again the concept that I'm giving you is once you set something aside for Shabbos, then you're okay. Phone left on a bed. How do we deal with that? Based on the principles that we've seen.
We'd knock it off with our elbow, wouldn't we? Or we could shake the bed.
Use your elbow, use your teeth, or you could shake it off. You remember we said you could shake something off, and if you needed to, you can move something indirectly. So if neither of those two would work, you couldn't use your teeth or the back of your arm, or you couldn't shake it off, you could pick up the duvet and put it down somewhere. So it doesn't have to stay there. Cracking up a nut with a hammer, again, everyone says it's not okay, but the reality is it is okay. Because a hammer is something that, you couldn't crack open a nut, or you could use scissors to open up, cut open a box of food. So it's actually not a problem because it's a type of Muktza where if you need it for something, it's a much lighter form of Muktza. So I'm allowed to use the hammer to crack open a nut or scissors to open up. I've got string around a cake box or whatever it is.
But you'd have to eat it though, wouldn't you? You'd have to eat it. Otherwise, if you weren't eating it, if you were cracking a nut and then eating it after Shabbos, then you didn't need to do it.
Yeah, okay. So you're going to do that for now. Yeah, okay. You're going to,
Can I ask a question? Next, use your, if you're opening up the nut and you're using the hammer, if you convert the hammer and hit the nut with the handle, then is that acceptable? Because you're using
allowed to, I'm telling you, you're allowed to use the hammer.
Right.
Even an item which is Muktza, but if it's a type of item which you could use in a non-Muktza type of way, I'm telling you, the hammer, the scissors, these types of things, it's not a problem. It's not a problem. Throwing out a dirty nappy, not a problem, or the dirty rodent, we probably want to stay away from that because it grosses us out. It's allowed because it's something repulsive. You're allowed to remove something that's repulsive on Shabbos. The sukkah decorations, so you're not really supposed to move them. The exception will be if it falls on the table. Then you try and move it indirectly, try and shake it off. If you can't, then you can't. The fresh egg, of all these 7 scenarios, the fresh egg or chicken lays, I've got no solution. The other 6, inbuilt, then they're not problems. There are different ways to deal with them. Whether it's you move it indirectly, whether you shake it off, whether you designate it. That fresh egg or chicken lays, I've got no solution. The milk that comes out of the cow, no solution. That this Muktza, it's created on Shabbos, can't use it. Okay, we're finally going to finish with the Shabbos table with the Shabbos candlesticks. Again, nobody in the world before you start looking at this would have thought it's an issue. But there is this thing called a base. That once something that's Muktza gets put on something else, that it's not just that the candles become a problem, the table, which is the base, becomes the problem. Again, we'll finish with this, which is, by the way, if you've been at our house on a Friday night, those of you from Leeds probably not had the opportunity yet. We've actually got a tray that we leave off the table partially because of this reason. Not just because of the kids and whatever. Because of this reason, we leave it at the side on a thing, and it stays there over Shabbos. You don't get into any issues with the table. But I'll tell you how you would deal with this. The way to deal with this is, if you would put down a valuable item on the table before Shabbos, then it's no longer a base. A valuable item in this case could be a challah. If you put a challah down, or whatever, I'm just giving you an example, something which you're going to use during the meal, a kiddush cup, whatever it is, then you're going to be okay. Then it's no longer a base. The base is a problem if all you had on at the beginning of Shabbos was you hadn't got around to setting the table, and all you had was the tablecloth with the candlesticks. Even when the candles burn out, you would not be able to, take the tablecloth off, or whatever it is, the next day. That'll be it. It'll be a base for the rest of Shabbos. So it's a real case. Before Shabbos, you have to make sure that there is, if you've got your candlesticks on the table, you have to make sure that you've got something which is non-Muktza, whether it's a siddur, whether it's a challah or something like that, that's actually on the table that's dealing with it. It'll be the same thing with a tray for candlesticks. Again, people who want to move it, the tray, they make sure to put a siddur or something like that down on the tray in order that it doesn't become the base. Again, we're not even discussing the candlesticks. We're discussing right now the tray or the table. And again, this could apply in other cases. For example, this could apply in a case like, anything that you've got that you've put Muktza down on. Like, I don't know, you've put money in a bowl. So now, if you put money in a bowl on Friday, that bowl becomes the base for the money. You can't use that bowl anymore. Again, the way around it is, if you would also have, if for whatever reason money has to be that, okay, so put something else that's Shabbos friendly inside the thing, then you could use that table or that bowl or whatever it happens to be. Question, if the candles are a tray on the table, is the table still a base? If the candles are on a tray on the table, I'm gonna come back to you on that one. That you've got the tray. Again, you're saying all you've got is the tray. I think it's still going to be. I want to just do some research. I think that is still going to be an issue. Because I think you're going to have a double issue. I think you're going to have the tray and the table. Unless, I think you're going to have a double issue there. But I'm going to come back to you on that one. Okay, so again, you may not have thought of those things. So what we try to do tonight is, yes, we've shown you there are things that are Muktza you never in a million years would have thought of Muktza. So whether it's the pebble, whether it's the dirty nappy, whether it's the Shabbos table that's got the candlesticks on it. But on the other hand, we're showing you that the way that the rabbis specifically set up the prohibition of Muktza, they never set it up when either you're moving things indirectly, you're shaking it off, or you're indirectly shaking it off, or in an abnormal way. They themselves have set it up, never set it up under those circumstances. So in almost all scenarios, the one that I struggled with was when the milk, you got the egg from the chicken, which you just can't eat on Shabbos, it got born that day. Other than that, there are almost always Shabbos-friendly ways to be able to move things. There's no reason, with a little bit of information, to violate Shabbos. That's just how it was set up. Okay, I know that was a really hard topic. I'm telling you, I spent many years learning this, and I actually learned this in Kolok, an advanced rabbinical school, and we spent weeks learning this. There's so much here. Feel free to send questions anytime. Again, the idea is just to give you a base of an idea, where we're going with this, to add one thing a week, to be able to make Shabbos a little bit more, more pure, a little bit more authentic. And we'll give one idea a week. So that's what we have for this week. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you for taking the time to listen. I'd love to hear what you thought. You can get in touch with me. You can find me on Instagram at @GilaRoss. And please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out on future episodes. Thank you and have a wonderful day.